So in this video I'm going to be comparing the history of the Temple of Jupiter in ancient Rome to the history of the Temple of Jerusalem in ancient Jerusalem. Now, both these buildings have like quite similar histories. So if we look at the Temple of Jupiter, the first temple was burned down in 83 BCE, the second in 69 current era AD, the third temple 80 CE, and then the fourth temple kind of fell into ruin towards the end of the Roman Empire. I think some of the ruins still stand now actually, but it kind of had a gradual decline. There wasn't like a single destruction unlike the earlier temples. Now if we look at the Temple of Jerusalem, we have like a similar thing. We have the first temple destroyed like a good while back, 586 BCE, but then the second temple destroyed 70 CE, so like pretty much the same time as the second temple of Jupiter. So there's kind of this similarity already just looking at the timelines, which is quite strange, you know, just looking at that. But then when you look a bit further, you dig a little bit deeper and you look at the tax that was paid to these temples. You see that the Jews were forced to pay a tax to the Temple of Jupiter after the fall of the second temple of Jerusalem. So if we read this little bit, the tax was imposed after the destruction of the second temple in 70 CE, in place of the levy or tithe payable by Jews towards the upkeep of the temple. The amount levied was 2 denarii, equivalent to 1/2 of a shekel that observant Jews had previously paid for the upkeep of the Temple of Jerusalem. The tax was to go instead to the Temple of Capitoline Jupiter, if I've said that correctly. So yeah, if we just go back to this little diagram, schematic. So when the second Temple of Jerusalem was burned down, the Jewish people started paying tax to the third temple of Jupiter in Rome, which coincidentally had been destroyed pretty much the same time, and coincidentally again like each time it was the second temple. So I mean, this is beginning to look like kind of like a duplicate version of history. You know, we've got two retellings of the same story in a way, similar to what, say, you know, Anatoly Fomenko and people like that, their view on history, that, you know, there's a lot of stuff that's been, you know, repeated and written into the historical records more than once, because the same story's been told but situated in different places or different times or in different languages and cultures. So you get these duplicate histories, and history gets very confused and mixed up and garbled. So yeah, it's quite interesting that like we've got this similar story, and Jewish people paid taxes, and pretty much the exact same tax, to both these temples. And then like even if we look at the name Jupiter, we can kind of break that down to Jew, Peter. Like Peter means father. So even the name Jupiter could mean father of the Jews, although that's me kind of speculating. Now that's not an accepted etymology, but again it's quite interesting. And then if you look at the destruction of the Temple of Jerusalem, the second temple, the earliest depiction of it is on the Arch of Titus, which is in Rome. So it's like the earliest depiction of the second temple of Jerusalem is actually situated in Rome on the Arch of Titus. So we'll see this picture here, which shows the menorah with the seven candles. Now, in fact, this menorah on the Arch of Titus, I think, is the earliest depiction of a menorah, and this was actually used as the basis for the menorah on Israel's emblem. So it's all quite interesting, and of course, like modern history describes this, or modern historians describe this as like an illustration of the sacking of the Temple of Jerusalem by the Romans. But of course there isn't any inscriptions on this depiction actually saying that. There's a few inscriptions, but they're generally just dedications, just, you know, saying it's dedicated to this emperor or this god or whatever, but there's no, like, you know, they don't write the entire story on these so-called ancient depictions. But yeah, it's just, you know, it's very very curious. Got these very similar histories that like have this incredible overlap.